A very warm welcome to everybody. Good afternoon and greetings whichever part of the world you're joining us from. I'm Shruti. I head policy and strategy at IWAGE. We're the Institute for What Works to Advance Gender Equality. And for those of you who are already familiar with our work, you might know what I'm about to speak on. But for those of you who are new here, we were conceptualized sometime back in early 2018 when the conversation around women's economic empowerment, particularly female labor force participation, had not really taken center stage. And over the last 8 years, a story has been unraveling, and it's been happening real time and happens as we speak right now. And our effort has been to document and build evidence around the enablers and barriers for enhancing women's economic empowerment, with a particular focus on improving the female labor force participation rates. So, we are the Institute for What Works to Advance Gender Equality, and therefore we understand we have to look at multifaceted cross-cutting issues. And over the years, we have worked on building better measurement frameworks to capture women's work comprehensively. We have worked on the care economy. We are trying to look at the intersections of climate and women's work. And there are several themes that we work on. And our effort through evidence building is to ensure real policy transformation and system strengthening. One of the key areas of work, therefore, is the future of work, future of women's work in particular. And that brings me to the context of today's discussion on the platform economy. As early as 2020, when platform companies were relatively new and there were very few, we have started working on this issue, working directly with platform companies like Urban Company, also while speaking to the women workers and understanding how the space is taking shape. And again, it's a rapidly changing, rapidly evolving space. That is what digitalization looks like. And our effort has been to be continuously in touch with both the labor demand and labor supply side issues. In this context, we have done quite a few studies, and my colleagues here, who are the panelists for today's discussion, will take us through some of our learnings, some of the challenges we have also faced as an evidence to policy think tank in transforming some of the insights into real-time change. But before we start today's discussion, I'll just introduce our panelists for today. I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Bidisha Mondal, who is the head for research and strategy at IWAGE. Her research focuses on multiple dimensions of gender gap with a particular emphasis on the Indian labor market, and she holds a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Along with Bidisha, we have Prakriti Sharma. She's a senior research manager at IWAGE. She's a mixed methods researcher with extensive experience in field-based studies and development practice, supporting research projects across various thematic areas. She holds a postgraduate degree in sustainable development practice from the Terry School of Advanced Studies. So welcome, Bidisha and Prakriti, and welcome to everybody who is joining in. So before we start, it would be useful, Bidisha, if you could help us contextualize or situate the platform economy within the larger macroeconomic scenario and help us understand how it's taken shape.
Thanks, Shruti. Good afternoon, everyone. So as per the Niti Aayog report, gig economy, platform economy is supposed to generate significant employment opportunities, and gig workforce is forecasted to reach around 23.5 million by 2019-30. Also, we know that recently, over the recent years, the female labor force participation rate has increased significantly, but driven majorly by the rural women, not so much for urban women. Now, platform economy being urban-centric and also offering the flexible work, flexibility for whom to work, how much to work, and when to work, it was supposed to facilitate women's labor force participation, particularly in the urban areas. And also at the same time, we know that there are many state level legislations which are coming up to govern the platform economy. And therefore, it's very important that we understand women's challenges and concerns in the platform economy so that this can be incorporated in the legislative framework properly. On this, my colleague Prakriti will be talking in detail, so I won't be spending much time on that. However, so as Shruti already mentioned, that IWAGE has engaged with the gig economy from long time back, starting in 2020, where we had examined a cohort of beauty workers, and majorly we looked into their labor market outcome and the flexibility aspect, how platform participation is impacting those. And then again in 2025, we conducted another study with MacArthur Foundation, where we expanded our sectoral focus. And along with focusing on few of the traditionally women dominated sectors like beauty, domestic care work, we also looked into the male dominated sectors or non traditional sectors for women, better to say in that way, which are ride sharing and delivery. And in this study, we also expanded our geographical focus. And in terms of objectives, also, we looked beyond labor market outcomes and tried to see how platform participation is playing a role in increasing their agency, women's agency in the domestic space, and also looked into few of the important aspects like collectivization of women workers, grievance redressal mechanism. And in the last study that we had conducted again in 2025, which was funded by ILO, the report is yet to be out. There we particularly deep dived into the grievance redressal mechanism. We looked into the existing grievance redressal mechanism, the operational realities through capturing workers' experiences, and based on that, we tried to provide recommendation to strengthen the grievance redressal mechanism. Now, again, coming to the macroeconomic perspective, Prakriti, if we can go to the next slide. Uh, uh, yeah, maybe we can go to the, okay, I'll just briefly talk about. So basically, yeah, modes of operation. Yeah, thank you. When we looked at the platform's modes of operation, we found that the modes of operation of these platform companies differ significantly across the sectors. For example, in case of domestic and care sector, we found that the geographical outreach of these platform companies are very limited, and they are majorly operating at 2 to 3 cities, catering to limited number of customers and employing limited number of workers. And if we look at their revenue source, it's majorly the commission and subscription fees charged both from the customers and the workers. And we found that majorly they are operating at a very informal level. And to our surprise, one of the domestic work platform, they did not have the legal license to operate also. So, and then if we look at the duration of the gigs, we will see that the duration is varying from hourly task to 24-hour service, and sometimes they are staying with the client also. Maybe we can go to the next one. Yeah. And then we looked at the modes of operation in the beauty sector platform. And then we found that in addition to commissions and subscription fees charged from the customers and workers, a significant source of revenue of the beauty sector platforms are coming from the product sale to their service partners. So a few of the platform companies revealed that they are earning a significant amount of profit by selling, for example, the beauty kits, spa tools, etc., to their service partners. If we look at the geographical outreach, they are operating at a very, large geographical region, and sometimes these platforms are operating internationally also, catering to a significant number of customers and engaging almost like one of the platforms told 47,000 workers. Yeah, one thing we had noticed that in the beauty sector platforms, majorly they are onboarding workers who are already trained with the sector specific skills. Another, and then the gigs, if we look at the duration of the gigs, these are majorly short term gigs, like ranging from 1 to 2 hours. However, one important thing that we noticed is that in case of beauty sector platforms, rating plays a very important role. I mean, starting from earnings, social security, everything is related to ratings. So the importance given to ratings is very high in the beauty sector platform. Yeah. In case of delivery sector, again, we found that the major source of revenue is coming from the commission. And sorry, in case of ride sharing, particularly, it's coming from subscription and commissions charged from both the customers and the workers. In case of delivery sector, in addition to this commissions and subscription, these platforms are also earning from intermediaries like restaurant. They are charging advertising fees to these restaurants, etc. And if we look at the geographical outreach, again, these platforms are also operating on a very large scale and sometimes internationally. Women's participation is, however, very limited in these sectors, both due to restrictive supply side norms and also they are facing the negative employer bias. In addition to that, women also face high entry barrier in these sectors because you need to have a vehicle to participate in this sector. So most of the time, women either don't own the vehicles or they need to pay high rents for these vehicles. So that entry barrier has been a constraint for women to participate in these sectors. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. So, based on the study that we had done, funded by MacArthur Foundation in 2025, one of our major objective was to see that whether the platform economy is actually facilitating women's entry into the workforce or not. And there we found positive result. In our sample, we had done a quantitative survey of around 600 workers, and in that, around 440 women workers. So we found that around 45% of women mentioned that before joining the platform they were not working before. So yeah, platform economy has facilitated women's entry into the workforce significantly, and this percentage is actually much lower in case of men. It's 27% only. Yeah. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. Then we looked at what kind of sectoral diversification or sectoral transition platform participation led to. And again, the situation varies across the sectors. We found that in case of care, domestic service, and beauty service, which are traditionally women dominated sectors, women who are working in these platforms, they mentioned that most of the women, they mentioned that they were in previously also they were in similar work or similar sector. However, in case of ride sharing and delivery, around 33% of women mentioned that they were in dissimilar kind of job. They were in a different sector before joining the platform. When we inquired deeper, then we found that this sectoral transition has been majorly facilitated by different NGOs like Azad Foundation, who are giving the skill training. They are equipping these women with the driving skill to facilitate their sectoral transition. Uh, you can see this code that in case of other sectors like beauty, most of these platforms are onboarding worker who already have the sector specific skills. Yeah, I'd like to stop here. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Vidisha. So, I think it's fair to say that when it started, when platforms had made an entry into the labor market, a lot of the operations happened in a policy vacuum. And there have been certain changes. We are all trying to understand this over time. There has been changes in wages, social security mechanisms, and there's also been a thrust of how platform work can make lives flexible for women workers, right? And there's been a lot of conversation around that. It would be interesting to understand how platforms have fared on this front. Similarly, you mentioned in passing about the skilling of certain sectors. There is a deliberate choice of hiring already skilled workers. Is that so in case of all platforms across different sectors, or is that only about beauty workers? And what really have you understood in terms of the sort of investments that platform companies are willing to make as far as skilling workers are concerned?
Yeah. Thanks, Shruti. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in our study, basically, we tried to make a comparative analysis between the pre-platform employment and the current participation. We looked into the average earnings, and we see again the situation varies across the sectors. In case of ride sharing and delivery, we'll see that in platform participation in the platform job, there is a moderate level of increase in earnings. In case of beauty service, however, the earning increase is very significant. Again, when we are coming to the care and domestic service, the increase in earning is actually marginal. However, although in the beauty service we have seen that earnings has increased significantly, workers, a significant number of workers basically complained about the rising commission rates. And also one major complaint was the mandatory product purchase from these platforms. So basically these workers mentioned that they had to purchase certain products like the beauty kits, the spa tools, etc. from these platforms mandatorily at a price which is much higher than the market price. So that was a complaint from the workers. And also in other platforms, what we found, the workers mentioned that over time there is a reduction in earnings, and that is majorly due to two reasons. One, rising commission rate. Secondly, as these platforms are onboarding more and more workers, the power worker availability of gigs is actually coming down. So that has led to a decline in their earnings over time. Yeah, so that was the situation on earnings. Maybe we can go to the, yeah. And then we looked into the social security benefit also, and we found that only one kind of social security benefits, health insurance, where there happened some gains. And that also varies sector. I mean, across the sectors, the situation varies. In case of beauty service, ride sharing, and delivery, we can see that health insurance coverage has increased significantly in case of platform job as compared to their previous employment. Maybe we can go to the next one. Yeah, however, when we inquired further, a significant number of workers mentioned that although they have the health insurance, they don't know how to avail of it. They don't know how to avail of the benefits. They don't have clarity regarding the terms and condition, what all benefits are covered under that, and how to claim the reimbursement. So they really significantly lack clarity on that front. So even though they have access to this, it's not a very effective one. And also we found that there is a, I mean, ratings are so many times linked with the social security coverage. If the rating is coming down, then sometimes they're losing coverage. So this sort of information also we gathered from there. Yeah, can we go to the, yeah. And then we also tried to understand, since platform job is coming with that promise of flexibility, we tried to understand how much it's creating ease for women to carry out the domestic responsibilities alongside work. After platform participation, has it become easy? So we looked at the time use pattern, and we saw that after platform participation, actually working hours marginally it has increased only, it did not decline. Secondly, I'd like to mention here, when we calculated working hours in the platform job, we could not take into account the waiting time. We did not do that. So if we add waiting time to it, the working hours will increase further. And then we asked a very simple question, binary question, that whether it has created any ease to carry out the domestic responsibilities or not. But a significant share of women across sectors mentioned that no, they are finding it extremely difficult. And here I'd like to mention few of the platform policies which actually compromised on the flexibility aspect. If you think of the mandatory login hours, sometimes they get penalties on rejecting the gigs, and also the incentive linked threshold structure. All these platform policies are actually incentivizing women for their full-time engagement. Secondly, when the per gig earning is declining, to generate sufficient earnings also, platform workers are actually staying engaged in the app on full-time basis, because otherwise they won't be able to generate sufficient earnings. uh, yeah. And then we also looked at the initial enablers and barriers. And across the sectors, we found that access to digital infrastructure, which include access to mobile phone, access to internet infrastructure, and also access to digital skill, that has been a major enabler when they started doing the platform job at the first place. It had been a great enabler. And also permission, supply side norms, permission from the family, that had been a second most important enabler. However, as we looked at the barrier across the sectors, we found that women cited domestic responsibilities to be a primary barrier when they were planning to, when they had joined a platform. So that had been a major barrier. Yeah, and then we also looked at the upward mobility, professional development, and skill training provided by the platforms. We found that in most of the cases across the sectors, before joining the platform only, the most of the workers had the sector specific skill training, and that they had received from another skill training organization, NGOs, etc. So the sector specific skills were not provided by the platforms. And then we asked about whether the platforms provided any sort of training or not. And yeah, the workers told that yeah, their in-person training happened in most of the sectors, but that training majorly focused on familiarization of the workers with the app, standardization of the services, basically how to face the customers on the behavioral thing. It was not on providing the sector specific skills. And most of them don't see any prospect of upward mobility in these sectors. In beauty services, also a significant percentage of worker told that they don't see any career growth path. So that happens across the sectors. Um, yeah, can we go to the? I think I'd like to stop here. Yeah.
Thanks, Vidisha. So I think what I'm understanding, and for our listeners as well, some of these insights are very useful in helping us understand, in whatever role or capacity you play within this ecosystem, to understand how some of these opportunities can actually be strengthened. Right now, there are opportunities, but there are some gaps, and filling these gaps will actually help transform platform work into something more aspirational, especially with respect to the issues that you mentioned about skill training. and again, enhancing their upward mobility. Some of these measures will actually make gig work aspirational for women workers, not just women workers, gig workers in general. And that then makes it a real opportunity instead of only filling the gap of lack of other forms of employment. So, all of us here, I think, are engaging at different levels. So, one takeaway for all of us is that taking some of these findings and packaging it in a way that if we are really looking at women led development, it's not just about bringing more women into participating in gig work. It's also about how can they take on more leadership roles? How can they get certified as skilled workers across sectors? I think there's also some bit of work we did in terms of care provisioning and platform work, where there's a clear demand for skill. Similarly, with beauty sector workers, like you mentioned, but expanding this throughout all the subsectors would make this more of an opportunity than a distress driven form of employment. So thanks so much, Bidisha. Prakriti, I would like to then bring you on. We are right now speaking of the challenges. So we did do a study to understand deep dive, particularly on what challenges women workers face. And in this context, what are some of the existing grievance redressal mechanisms within some of the platform companies? What are the challenges even within those mechanisms that workers are facing, especially with the advent of AI enabled mechanisms? What are the limitations, and where does the human interface, or rather the human versus digital interface threshold, what should that look like?
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Vidisha. Vidisha's left me on a great note too, actually, where she's covered a lot of context that I will also be talking about. But to start with, since platform work has recently come into our lives, which is not so recent now, it's been quite some time, it is also important to understand that yes, platform work might have some challenges for all workers, but how those are exacerbated for women, especially because they come from a different social context. For example, there are social norms guiding their mobility, there is domestic and care responsibilities at home, there is credit, access to credit and access to financial services, digital literacy, everything that comes into play when we talk about platform work and women's involvement in it. So to understand what we found were the main challenges in the last year, especially the last two studies, were around three major domains. One is earnings, the other is algorithms, and the third was safety, dignity, and working conditions. However, what we see and what is most talked about, either due to a lot of legislations coming in, or collective action that happens, or platform-led dissemination, is that yes, there is earnings volatility. There is uncertainty with respect to the earnings that platform workers may take at the end of the day. And there is also a decline in those earnings over time because a lot of labor force has entered the market and the number of gigs might have reduced. But what we don't end up talking about are the incentive structures that shape these earnings, how there is an opportunity cost attached to the number of earnings that they take home, and how they're supposed to meet that incentive threshold every time to make sure to take home is enough or almost near enough for them to carry forward through their day. And there are additional costs, especially because we're talking about women workers who are dominated in beauty and care platforms and also domestic services. Especially in the beauty sector platforms, there are additional costs upfront that they have to pay for products that they also bear while traveling from one place to another, the fuel costs that delivery workers and cab drivers also share. And there are opaque deductions with respect to, even if there is a take home, they might not know what is getting deducted from their accounts. And there is, as Vidisha mentioned, limited avenues for upward mobility. There is skilled professionals who are getting incorporated into these platforms already with their existing skill set, which is continuously getting repeated in some form. Within algorithms, we talk about the time pressure, especially there was a major nationwide strike that happened in on December 31st by delivery workers regarding the 5-minute delivery, which was eventually mandated by the government to be removed by these platforms. But we still see a lot of domestic services platforms offer these services, like you would have house help in 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So the time pressure, yes, that has been something that has been talked about. But again, in the women's context, I feel like some issues are not as accentuated because they are seen in a different way. There is what Vidisha mentioned, limited flexibility. One of the key reasons why women end up joining these platforms is to make sure that there is time for home domestic chores and care work, and also the work that they do for these platforms. Ratings is also that what Vidisha mentioned, that you have to maintain a certain set of ratings, especially again in the beauty sector platforms. It's quite prevalent that you have to maintain a certain set of ratings, and if you drop these are customer ratings, and if these ratings drop, then you are also at the risk of ID deactivation, which means that you completely lose the chance of working on that platform ever again. And then there are these many policy changes. What Shruti mentioned in the beginning, that these policy changes happen as we speak. So these constant policy changes of how these platforms operate continue to happen, and the workers are not notified about it. This is something that they find out while they're on the job. Again, there are emergency cancellations that happen, especially with home-based services, which are heavily penalized, which again can lead to ID reactivation. Finally, in safety, dignity, and working conditions, we do talk about how there is some a rise of customer misconduct, because a lot of women provide these home-based services at people's homes. They're also out on the streets, going from one place to another while delivering. Also, women who are a part of ride-sharing services, even though they are small in number. So there is also gender bias regarding like women drivers who are on the road. But while we talk about these mobility risks, especially with the time pressure and how a number of accidents that happen for delivery professionals and even for home-based service workers, we also don't talk about the long-term health risks. For example, they are carrying a lot of material from one place to another to provide a certain service. They're carrying massage beds, they're carrying a lot of beauty kits, which has caused a lot of and are causing long-term health risks like spondylitis and tennis elbow. And another one important factor that we see within platform work is the rise of weakened bargaining power, because platform has now inserted itself as a medium between the key employer and the employee, which is the platform workforce. So we don't see that there is always a negotiation that is happening through the platform, that if somebody's service I did not like, or if somebody's behavior I did not like, be it a customer or the worker, the conversation happens through a platform, and there is a constant state of surveillance as to how you are treating each other. So, and this bargaining power is also slightly skewed to the benefit of the customer, where, for example, I'll take a beauty service example, because in that, if a customer gives a bad rating to a worker, it exponentially reduces their rating, which is linked to their social security, which is linked to their ID activation or deactivation. But if a worker, if they have the right, and some apps have provided that, where they can also rate the customer, it would take about 10 to 15 workers to give a bad rating to one customer to for the customer to be flagged as a not so nice customer. So that even if there is customer misconduct, it's slightly skewed towards the benefit of doubt to the customers. And discrimination continues to happen. An old form of discrimination is now in a new box, where, especially for home-based services, where caste and religion-based discrimination is quite prevalent in the country, you can always see their names and you can shortlist the people that you would want to have or you would not want to have. A platform representative themselves mentioned that there are times when customers come to them and expect a certain religion or a caste member to only enter their house. And those requests are usually not entertained but still exist. Now, since you asked for what exists as platform-led support systems, because there are a number of challenges that women face. There are chatbots. These are a recent, I would say a few years recently introduced system, and help centers. These have evolved through what helplines used to be. Helplines still exist, but the chatbots and help centers have mainly been extremely AI enabled. For example, the chatbot would give you a set of issues that you might be able to raise. And if the issue that you're facing does not fall under that ambit, after many attempts, you may get a helpline number, and you can't be sure if that helpline number would also have a human at the end of it or an AI bot speaking to you directly. And these are now creating these ticket-based complaint system. There are escalation mechanisms for issues which are of much urgent needs, like ID deactivation. But even there, the supervisors and the people in control, or the help centers who sit there, don't necessarily have the authority, one, to answer you or tell you about the process. If there is an appeal, then how is the process going, and if there will be any resolve at all. The safety tools, there are SOS features. This is something that is constantly talked about, panic buttons and SOS, but that merely exists in some cases with respect to ride sharing. And even for domestic services, you're never sure if these are actually going to, even if when used, are going to work. Then Vidisha mentioned the health insurance and social security, which is mainly limited to accidental insurance because of the time pressures that these platform workers face. And finally, the account review and deactivation process, which comes handy with the escalation mechanisms. These work in tandem. But what we find is that these support systems are also designed to only manage the operational issues and maintain platform efficiency. The help centers and the ticket-based lists that you see would not include how revised pay structures, or why algorithmic decisions are only giving me certain less number of gigs. What are the gendered vulnerabilities that a woman might be facing? So to answer if these systems are also accessible, responsive, transparent, and contestable, we could say that these are partially accessible. With the reliance heavily on chatbots, it's also important to not just know the phone to start and end a gig. You need to operate and know how to go through different portals and get to the problem that you're trying to resolve. There are also language barriers, but recently there has been an improvement with respect to including a number of regional languages for worker support. However, overall, there is a reduced access to human support, something that workers truly value. It is inconsistently responsive. You do not know, even if when a ticket is raised, if it will be resolved or it will be even responded to properly. There are delayed follow-ups. Sometimes ticket auto close when there has been enough time and there has been no action. And even in urgent situations like SOS, some platforms have made it easier for women to be able to reach SOS, because they also have a waiting time of about an hour and a half, but it is escalated for women. But then these urgent situations are also not treated with the same urgency. There is limited transparency with respect to, again, the issues that these platform-led support systems also raise. Unclear decision making. They do not know why a decision was taken a certain way. Even if even if an account was deactivated, they don't usually get to know the reason, despite submitting a number of documents to make their case. And especially in the case of ratings, and if a customer has given a bad rating, which could be for any subjective reason, they didn't like the app interface, they didn't like maybe the way it could be anything. Even if you get a bad rating, there are very few opportunities to challenge, and there are very few ways that you can go about it, especially through supervisors who don't have enough authority to be able to take those ratings away. And there are limited appeals for deactivation. As I mentioned, it's exclusively transparent. It's not that transparent as to how that process takes place, and they don't see any evidence or receive explanations for whatever may happen. So to summarize, the chatbots and help centers make it difficult to reach human support. It's a delayed and repetitive, fragmented process. If a ticket is closed, you go through the chatbot again, you make that complaint again, and you're not sure if you'll get to the resolve. And there is limited transparency on the outcomes, and sudden sanctions happen with limited explanation. Just to summarize how it happens, this is a case study of the last study that we were part of, where she's a worker at a beauty service platform. She has 17 years of experience prior to joining the platform, and it's been 5 years since that she's been working on the platform. Her father passes away, and she can't return to work. But she still tries to, meets with an accident in heavy rain, faces an elbow injury, misses the bookings that were decided for the day. The immediate action is that the ID gets blocked. So now what she does to seek redressal is first goes through the bot. She goes, files multiple tickets, physically tries to visit office, is not allowed inside, finds a help center, sends documents and injury photos. Mitra is the help kiosk, is what they call it. Again, there is no resolution, and the tickets keep on getting automatically closed. Finally, she gets a call back, and she feels like there will be a human to listen to her. It is an AI call, and there is no part to human review. The call gets cut automatically. Now she has paid 35,000 as the onboarding investment. The rating system continues to be penalizing her in a way that these bookings, the bookings that she could not make up to, and eventually there is a loss of income. There is no idea with how the procedure was. She has continued to fight for it, the last we heard. So what she says is, the person who is at the help kiosk says very easily that we don't do this, we can't change it, it is beyond our control, the system does it. But the humans made the system, and if humans made it, humans can change it. So it is a very deep insight into how AI chatbots, the introduction has slowly faded away the human interaction, and what the human interaction can actually bring to workers and the challenges that they may be facing. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Prakriti. And I think your next piece on collective action, I think it's not only in the context of AI chatbots, the disconnect that exists between the employer and the employee and the platform-led mediation also happens when it comes to collectivization, worker-to-worker interaction, something that we faced even in identifying our respondents, because there is no, so to speak, catchment area, because these are workers scattered across geographies and doing different kinds of jobs. So in that case, what does collectivization even mean? What does it look like? And again, in that context, even if they collectivize and even if they have, if they're creating a charter of rights and demands, how do they pitch it to when there are very few legal frameworks? Although we know that there are some states that have fared better. Some states have taken the charge and actually developed a policy framework within which these platform companies are expected to operate. The implementation again will be a challenge. So if you could just take us through what collective action could look like in the platform economy, what are some of the legal frameworks, and what have some states managed to do so far?
Thanks, Shruti. Because these challenges exist, and even there continue to be issues with the support that the platform provides, this is what the workers usually end up resorting to. So this collective action can be seen through the different forms of organizing. There are unions, which are recently coming up and are increasing in number and also in size. There are associations. There are also informal networks and worker groups. Informal networks that they make through WhatsApp, worker groups, and especially for delivery, there are hubs, is where workers meet. So this is where it usually happens. But it is also important to see that where do women lie? Who gets represented through this? So we have in our country, I will be talking about it later as well, that we've seen that there has been a lot of issue raising by the ride sharing sector recently, especially by the delivery sector. But the women dominated sectors are domestic care and beauty, is where we don't see a lot of issues. Like they happen in isolation. Or they happen in like one-off areas, and they come up and they go, but it's never a conversation that actually leads to some policy traction. So this is because there are structural and gendered barriers to organizing, which have existed before as well, because there is time poverty that women face, and there is also high opportunity costs of their participation, which can also lead them to not being able to work at all. But with platforms coming in, there is spatial dispersion of workers. This is also limiting their informal networks. Platforms also sometimes do not allow workers to interact with each other and penalize interaction between each other. There is also app-based tracking. Apps have their location, apps know when they're stopping, apps know where they're going. So there is always that fear that we're being tracked and our IDs might get deactivated. I think one interesting insight is just an interest over time that we saw, that this is between like 3 different strikes which have happened. Many have happened, but what actually comes to show what has the interest been over a specific period of time When we check Uber strike, we see many peaks that have that are present from 2016 to 2026. When we see Zomato strike, we see a very small peak at the end of 2026, which was the 31st December strike nationwide that happened. But when we see Urban Company, which is also a leading platform for beauty services, we see a flat line. So because of this, the concerns that become visible through collective action are also of these different segments, of these different sectors. So not so much in the domestic and the beauty and care services. But to summarize that, there is women's engagement within these unions, yes, is shaped by care burdens, but also with surveillance and fragmented solidarities. So, but how do then women collectivize, and how do, like, even if these isolated movements have happened, how do women find time or make sure to collectivize and be able to raise their issues? Because there are a number of challenges that they face. So there are these three examples that we saw in the field when we were doing our field work. In Delhi, we saw that there was a woman who was who was a domestic abuse victim at home and was always surveilled with respect to where she would go, and was not or motivated or recommended to join any union, because it was all it was expected at home was to go to work and come back. But she recently lost her sister due to the work that was involved in the platforms, and due to the urgent need to go to a certain house, and she faced an accident. So when the grievances became severe, she risked that surveillance and fear, and made sure that she made that grievance across and found an association to talk about it. In Hyderabad, we would see that in traditional unions, there would not be, which were of also male dominated sectors, women would find that these are spaces of control rather than support. But there are also newer inclusive unions which are forming, which are also giving women a space to also collectivize. And finally, in Mumbai, we see that there is the strongest union presence for beauty and domestic services, where women come with their children to the meetings while they're managing care responsibilities. It also becomes a space for just survival and venting and sharing challenges than strategic bargaining. But it has also led to some sort of bargaining, where there was this customer who would harass multiple women in one house. By harass, I mean would ask them to do menial tasks that they were not supposed to. So it led to multiple women giving that customer a bad rating, for the customer to be flagged as the problem, and eventually getting blocked to be able to book any further services for the platform. As I mentioned, this also explains how the trajectory of collectivization has been the way it is, because the ride-sharing services platforms came first and eventually were followed with delivery services and home personal services. But because of a lot of challenges that women face to collectivize, we see partial policy traction in the other two, while we're yet to see what happens for home personal services. But there are persistent ways of collectivizing despite all of these constraints. There are, even if there are no formal unions, there are WhatsApp groups, informal hubs, where women tend to find some spaces. There is digital voice, like now social media, YouTube channels, where workers put out their grievances and document grievances publicly, and also raise issues that they're facing. There is also issue-based mobilization. For example, if a number of IDD activations happen, or a co-worker's accident is something that you witness, this is when the what we also again saw for the 5-minute delivery, is when we see a rise in mobilization, and there is constant persistence despite punishment. But again, women's participation in this is slightly limited, but is now also growing. Now moving on to where the workers lie with the support systems that platforms offer, with the collective action and the collectivization that platform workers have been able to do. Within the larger labor codes, the 4 labor codes that have been introduced by the government, the Code on Social Security is the first instance where gig workers are included in any legislation. It talks about their social security welfare. There is an e-Shram portal where workers can register, and there will be welfare measures attached by some transaction fee or some fee that will be levied to the platforms. The implementation is yet to be seen, but this is a conversation which has started. But gig workers are not included in any other labor code yet. As long as the state level legislations are concerned, there are 5 states which have passed gig worker social security and welfare acts as as per 2026. It started with Rajasthan in 2023, followed by Karnataka, Bihar, Jharkhand, and Telangana. There is a similar design that most of these follow. However, each has evolved into including a lot of different things like occupational safety and worker contracts, but they follow a similar design with tripartite machinery and a welfare board in place, which will be used for grievance redressal and internal disputes. So the representatives in the board will include gig workers, aggregators, government officials, and civil society members. By civil society members, it includes union workers, but the word union or association is not mentioned in the law as of yet. The welfare cess fee that will be charged to the platforms also varies state to state. There is from 1 to 5% that Karnataka also said, but in I think Jharkhand and Bihar, it's 1 to 2%. So that also varies. But that essentially all of these laws focus on social security, but do not fully cover the labor rights legislative framework. For example, there is no regulation of wages or fair pricing. There is currently no provision for minimum wages also that is proposed. Freedom of association is also not included within these laws. And Karnataka is the only state where some occupational safety and health standards have started to take shape, where they've included some compliance with the POSH Act, and also have included mandated women workers to be a part of these boards. The number of women workers is not yet decided, but the social security ambit also covers maternity benefits, but those maternity benefits are also not really clear. So there is a lot of implementation-based negotiations which are happening within these states. Again, there is no employee-employer reclassification. Just to highlight, platform workers are not considered workers, they're contractual workers. They fall between the ambit of self-employed workers and contract-based workers right now. And there is no terminology as a worker that is associated with them. Different platforms call them with different names. They call them as partners, pilots, and or a platform contractual worker, but not exactly a worker. And there continue to be slight implementation delays with respect to whatever exists within these laws. As for example, Rajasthan's act was passed, but it is currently tabled for implementation. Hello.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Cover the bit on the stakeholders.
Okay.
To be shaped.
Okay. Just to summarize, this is a interest power matrix of who all shape and who all are the part of the platform economy. So the stakeholders that hold highest power and highest interest are aggregators. Highest power, but low interest because there is not a nationwide legislation yet, is the government. Low interest and low power are the consumers of these platforms, and the high interest but low power are the platform workers and unions. This is because the government is currently missing a national legislative framework. The regulatory framework has recognized the imbalances and the welfare board has come in. The aggregators also have had a dialogue to improve working conditions, but what will happen and how the worker voices will be amplified and how worker representation will be included in policy decisions is yet to be seen. The consumers are paradoxically granted significant power because they have the power of ratings, they have the power of feedback, which is valued higher than worker rating systems. So that impacts their earnings, that impacts their social security that they eventually get, and also workers' access to jobs. And finally, the platform workers and unions, their capacity and willingness of unions to organize platform workers, again, remains challenged because of surveillance, because of the fragmentation of the kind of work that platform workers do. Yeah.
Thanks, Prakriti. Actually, in this matrix, you correctly point out that there's a paradoxically significant power. And some of this power also has an impact on the governance, especially when we talk about algorithmic assigning of work. I do think there is space, again, this is for our audience and for ourselves, there is space to engage with all of these stakeholders, and the modality will be very different. But I do think there is space for some sort of campaigns around the plight of workers to sensitize the customers. Like, for example, something as simple as does a service have to be delivered instantly? There are two options, right? There is an option to schedule it, which actually allows some room for flexibility. So I do think the platforms are designed in the way that the power rests with the aggregator and the customer, and just sensitizing customers around these issues while we work with platform workers and on the policy engagement front. Now, those are extremely important, but I do sense that there is a space for campaigning around sensitizing customers. Like, is it really necessary to get every service instantly within the next hour? Is something for all of us to think about. So yeah, we have a few questions, and I think you both must have read it, but I'll just quickly ask. We have Kavita asking us whether women who have transitioned from non-platform based employment to platform based work within the same sector, did work flexibility outweigh the loss of social security benefits? The idea seemed to suggest that women had greater long-term financial security before joining platform work. Would you say that's an accurate interpretation?
Uh, should I take that up?
Yes, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, as our data is showing, women in their pre-platform employment, they had better coverage, like better social security benefit on certain aspect, like maternity benefit, maybe paid leave, maybe. However, they had to forego those because they placed so much of importance on the flexibility aspect. As all of us know that the kind of domestic responsibility, the kind of disproportionate care burden that women had to undertake in the household space. So because of that, they preferred, flexibility was prioritized over these other social security benefits. And yeah, however, uh, once they had joined the platform, many of the women workers, particularly this came out through the qualitative interviews, they revealed that the kind of flexibility which exists in the platform that deviates from the promised flexibility. Again, as we discussed before, because of many of the platform policies like mandatory login hours, threshold linked incentive structure, etc. So yeah, they were willing to forego those benefits, and value the flexibility aspect more and join the platform. However, what they had expected, that sort of flexibility they could not get after joining the platform. So the platform policies are also to change to ensure flexibility in true sense. The question also, I think the second part also asks about the long-term financial security. So yeah, in their pre-platform employment, earnings were stable, so they could have planned better. The financial planning could have been better in terms of savings plan and expenses. And maybe the earnings increased in the platform participation, but it's highly unstable. And then women reveal that it makes it very difficult for them to do the financial planning properly. Yeah, I'd like to stop here. Prakriti, if you have to add anything, you may.
Yeah, thanks, Vidisha. And I think in the same vein, the experiences also differ across women workers, especially depending on how long they've existed within the platforms. There were certain incentives and there were certain benefits for entry into these platforms when they started. So the experiences also vary across the timeline and of course across sectors. Um, okay, Rachita is asking us, what do you think is the impact of climate change, particularly heat, on workers' well-being?
Um, Okay, I'll take it. Rachita, great question. Thank you. Yes, so one of the long-term health impacts, which are also like looming right now, it's not just heat, it is also rain and any sort of weather that workers have to power through. It is something that is rising in the discourse, and there are a lot of impact on their current health and also their long-term health that they have to face because they're constantly on the road. This is especially true for delivery workers who are on the street delivering from one place to another. So this is an important aspect as to the challenge that workers face, which is also rising because their workplace is usually the roads. Vidisha, do you want to add anything?
Thanks, you covered it. Maybe the next question. Yeah, Shruti, you can
Yeah,
read.
I'll just read it out. I mean, I think it's there. Everybody can read it, but I'll just let me go ahead. Do you think women platform workers have been able to collect device and gain recognition faster and better than non-platform women informal workers? If so, why?
I think no, I mean, for non-platform informal workers, it's easier to collectivize as compared to the platform workers because they face significant repercussion. Collectivization is, I mean, not encouraged at all, and they face significant repercussion as severe as their ID blockage. So yeah, and
Just
particularly that
yeah,
yeah,
please
that
go
that
ahead.
section also varies sector wise. In the women dominated sectors, since they are working in a closed workplace, they are not on public roads most of the time, so it's difficult to reach out to them also. So yeah, collectivization is significantly less among women in the platform economy. Yeah, Prakriti.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, that yes, there has been like that women are all like whoever collectivizes is always at the risk of some sort of reprimandation, even if it's non-platform or platform. But for women especially, I believe it has also started because these platforms are also inclusive of so many workers who are men for whom it is easier to collectivize. But yes, the surveillance makes it extremely difficult. You would assume that with digital devices and WhatsApp and a lot of social media it might become easier, but your visibility in participating in all of those things with AI bots and devices to be able to also scan your faces, or even if any representative from the platform to be able, if they join those WhatsApp groups where you're discussing collectivization or a protest, enters, it fully dismantles all the work that you've been putting in. So I believe that there are these exacerbated challenges which have come in with platform work collectivization.
Do you also want to mention what we keep discussing, that the only time when workers actually end up meeting each other are during their trainings or in parks? That's something that keeps coming up even if you have a chat with. So if you want to mention that, Prakriti.
Yeah, that's true. And even within those trainings, if these training trainers are also heavily trained in a way to not let the workers interact with each other much. And also the workers who've been in platforms for a long time, as Shruti mentioned, there were certain perks that were given, there were better earnings that were provided, are not allowed to interact with the younger cohort which has come in, which doesn't know of those perks, of the perks ever existing. So for them, the newer joinees, those challenges might not be the same for the workers to not even, like the older workers to not even reach them and talk to them about it. So yeah, the spaces are limited, and even when they're limited, I think the collectivization still is holding momentum and is happening because there are these few places where they can meet. Yeah. Shruti, do you want to add anything?
No, no, I just thought that's an interesting insight. Okay, we have Vanita asking, in the power matrix, consumers have power through rating systems. So why are they classified in the low power quadrant?
Yeah, it's mainly because customers essentially do not have a lot of power in how the platform economy is being shaped. Yes, their demand matters, but all of that is, apart from their demand, is granted to them by the platforms, like the ratings that exist for them and the feedback that the customers can provide. They don't essentially have that, but the platform is granting them. But you're right, like I mean, eventually they have now a lot of power, so maybe we could think about shifting that. But like, it was, my idea was just that it's not essentially something that customers hold, but the platforms are providing them with. Yeah.
Also, to add to what Prakriti mentioned, so we are majorly thinking about the policy landscape. So the customers really don't have much say there. I mean, yeah, they can rate, and whatever power they're having, it's given by the aggregator. And in the initial phase of platform economy, actually the workers also had the power to rate back the customers. So now at that time it was relatively balanced, but over time it has changed. Now, I mean, the workers are not now allowed to rate back the customers. So whatever power they are enjoying, it's majorly given by the aggregator, and here majorly we are talking about the policy landscape, the power to influence the policy landscape. So in that way, consumers really don't enjoy that kind of power.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this matrix particularly speaks of the policy and the legislative framework and therefore governance. But otherwise, they definitely have high power in impacting the daily lives of platform workers. Okay, so I if there are more questions, please feel free to add in the chat. We'll also probably link the report in the chat for those who want to have a detailed look at it. But there was something that one of you touched on earlier around whether platform work, which is also seen as a new form, new age kind of work, whether it reinvents or repeats or replicates some of the caste-based and identity-based segregation in these workspaces. And if you want to shed some light on that, any of you.
Yeah, so when we looked at our sample size and looked at the social category composition of our sample size, we found that significant a number of women from marginalized caste background are in the domestic and care sector, which you will see in the traditional labor economy also. And another thing plays a role. So, for example, in the male dominated sector or the ride sharing sector, particularly, the entry barrier is very high, which the initial capital needed to enter this sector is very high. And where marginalized women, marginalized people in general, they are facing a disadvantage. And that's where this caste-based or religion-based labor market segregation is getting repeated in the digital economy as well. And I'll also repeat and highlight what Prakriti also mentioned during her presentation. So in one of our domestic work platform, the representative mentioned that since their clients were having so much of preference for, when they were asking for workers, they were revealing their preferences for certain caste, certain religion. They had incorporated that option in their digital interface, where by paying a bit higher, you can reveal your caste preference for the worker or religion preference. And a lot of clients are actually willing to pay significant amount to get a worker of their preferred caste, which is very unfortunate. So yeah, the caste based, religion based segregation is getting repeated here also in the digital economy.
This is especially prevalent within the care and domestic services platforms.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. No, I see that of all the kinds of conversations we've been having in the ecosystem, I think there is clearly a gap in some amount of advocacy to be done with the customers. I don't know what shape and form it can take, but for our allies and partners listening in this, that's one space that I think that clearly awareness and advocacy on sensitizing customers across many of the issues that has come up today is something that we should look at. And this matrix also helps us in understanding who we should engage with and how. And there's going to be marginal progress on some of these aspects, perhaps all of them, but there is scope to engage with each of these stakeholders. I also then wanted to ask, are there any best practices? I mean, within India, I'm not just saying globally India versus other countries, but also are there certain platforms that are more sensitive to platform workers doing, putting together their own policies in a way that is beneficial to workers as well?
Vidisha, you want to take this?
Yeah. So basically, some platforms, Shruti, they have already started to make their platform policies more gender inclusive. Like they are removing these monthly work targets, search pricing models. But that is happening over the recent time. I am seeing that in our when we did the survey. In most of the platforms, it was not very gender inclusive. But then, yeah, these changes are happening, and slowly, I think this will ensure the flexibility that platform economy actually promised and attracted women. And also, some of the platforms, they have started actively providing the skills. So in one of the care platform, actually, when we had done our survey, they had provided some skill training, which helps to get retain talent, and also they see some scope of upward mobility also through training. They think that that will cause some sort of upward mobility. Yeah, some of the
Yes.
examples, yeah, we had.
And even with respect to the grievance redressal mechanisms, there would be helplines where social workers are employed who are trained to deal with the challenges that the platform workers might be facing. So that was also a refreshing thing to see, that the same care platform that Vidisha mentioned. Also, there is a ride sharing app which is now currently also being implemented in different states, which has taken into a lot of workers' grievances into consideration, is extremely transparent about the money that the workers will get if there are deductions, what they might be, and also constantly sits with worker representative groups to make sure that the services that they provide are in tandem and are making both customers and platform workers equally willing to be able to use it. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. And yes, Vanita, it is quite sad that this continues to be the functions through which labor market outcomes are shaped. Okay, so before we go to the close, and I would want both of you to give a few recommendations, and you can pace it as long term, short term. Although I don't know what long term recommendations can look like because this is changing. This is a space that's evolving by the minute. And if there are any questions, I don't think there are any further questions. Hope I haven't missed anything. And Rachita, if I can, yes, Rachita has put the link to the report. One of them, this is a combination of two studies. Perhaps the grievance redressal bit might take some time before it comes up on our website, but one part of the study is available. Yes, so go ahead and I would like to hear from both of you before we close on what are a couple of key recommendations.
These are the ones that we consolidated as per both the studies that we did, how these issues constantly come up and are still left slightly unaddressed when we look at the legal landscape and the support that the platform offers, which is earnings and the transparency with respect to that, sector-specific minimum earnings. If there is a cap to commissions, the commissions also keep changing with respect to the change in policies of these platforms. There are arbitrary deductions. So whatever the challenges that they might be facing have turned into the recommendations that we carry, which is that the working conditions and safety, their workplace goes beyond a certain location. It is also the roads, it's also the gender sensitive rest infrastructure. Chennai is a city which has now started rest spaces for platform workers, which is a very welcoming move, and implement POSH Act across all platforms, which can only be mandated through the state level legal measures. The grievance redressal is a constant demand that the chatbot driven systems, sure, they can exist, but to exist with human supported multilingual grievance mechanism systems where they can also speak to people who speak their language. Benefits should be comprehensive. They should be accessible regardless of performance ratings. They should not be that your rating should be so and so to be able to cover yourself or your family. And even to be able to access and utilize them, there should be vernacular language communications on how to claim them, and even like support with respect to claiming them. And genuine upskilling pathways, as Bidisha mentioned, the care platform that is actually offering that. So, which is tied to the worker tenure, which also incentivizes the worker to continue working with the platform where they see upskilling pathways for themselves, especially targeted training in non-traditional sectors, which are now some that civil organizations are doing, or the NGOs are doing, like Azad Foundation, to promote gender diversity, should be also integrated within these platforms. And the collective voice, the right to associate, legally recognize these unions and informal collectives, which also help women participate within these unions, and also mandate public discourse for earnings, algorithms, social security data, introduce platform workers as a distinct category in the National Labor Force surveys to be able to see how many platform workers are working, because all we have right now, as of now, are estimates, which I think has happened in the recent periodic labor force survey. So that is something that we are yet to see. Vidisha, do you also want to add something?
No, thanks. It's covered comprehensively.
No, thanks a lot. I think from our several discussions and the presentation today, there are clearly lots of gaps to fill. But when I do hear that there are platforms who are doing it right, it means that there is a way to do it. And I think our proposition is also that if gig is the way for the economy to function, and if that's where jobs are being created, then those structures need to be strengthened in favor of the workers. And that's probably the way to go forward. Any closing thoughts from either of you? I don't see any further questions, so we probably can close early.
I would like to emphasize again, at the risk of repeating myself, that sector specific skill training, the platforms should be undertaking, at a large scale. Because as Prakriti mentioned, now few of the NGOs are undertaking that, but that's not enough right now. And the non traditional sector, like ride sharing, delivery, these are the fast growing sectors. So women should not remain confined just to the women, traditionally women dominated sectors like care, domestic work and beauty. And so to facilitate women's participation in these sectors, the platforms has to come up with the skill training program. And there should be should be a mandate actually, to provide the skill training for the non-traditional sector. Yeah.
Right. Okay, Prakriti?
Yeah, I mean, this is something also what we discuss and what we know that these platforms, even though they've come recently, they're here to stay. They have built space for so much demand from the customers. So we know that these are going to exist and there are going to be a number of workers constantly participating in it. So the question is just to make sure how their participation is fully fair, it's inclusive, and it is also like a form of decent work that the platform workers are a part of. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Prakriti. Thanks, Bidisha. And thanks for everyone who has joined in. I just want to end on the note that as a policy research think tank, the role that IWWAGE tries to play is to relay some of these challenges, demands, and just communicate that these are the issues, and these are perhaps some of the ways or pathways through which they can be resolved in a way that is beneficial to the customer, as well as the worker. More often than not, if you resolve issues for the customer, it is beneficial even for the worker. It is beneficial even for the customer, and it can have a ripple effect. And our push is, which is also why we work closely with platform companies in making this, in actually relaying the challenges faced by workers to the platform companies and the policymakers. But yeah, this is a space that we'll continue working on. It is ever evolving, and we hope that while the promise of gig economy actually delivers for the workers as well, and not just for the customers who are the ones waiting for the delivery. With that, I'd like to call it a day. Thanks everyone for joining. And we should be most likely putting this up on our YouTube channel. I think, Vanita, somebody had asked. So it will be up on our YouTube channel. And you can also access the reports on our website. Thanks everyone, and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you.